The three girls hit the park bench at full speed. Lily got there first, which was always how it went. She was the fastest, the loudest, and the most likely to announce something that would change the entire afternoon. Her sisters, Avery and Brooke, landed half a second behind her, breathing hard, cheeks red from running, bread heels still clutched in their small fists, from the duck-feeding mission that had officially consumed the last 20 minutes of the afternoon. Their father, Marcus Webb, did not look up from the cold thermos in his hands. He had been staring at it for the past 5 minutes, not because there was anything interesting about a thermos, but because the coffee inside it had gone cold before they even left the house, and he had carried it all the way to Riverside Park anyway. That felt like a summary of his life. Recently. He was 39 years old. He had 3 7-year-old daughters who shared a face and a birthday, and very little else in terms of personality. He had a job in logistics that paid the bills and asked nothing interesting of him. He had a house with a leaking pipe under the kitchen sink that he had been meaning to fix for 6 weeks. And he had been alone, in every way that counted, for 4 years. He was not a man who talked about that last part. Lily tugged his sleeve. She always tugged before she spoke, which was not a habit he had taught her, and not one he had managed to discourage. "Dad," she said, "there are 17 ducks." "Good," he said. "Avery says there are only 15, but she is wrong." "Okay. I counted twice." "Lily." "What? Did you feed them?" "Yes." "Then we are done with ducks for today." Lily considered this. She sat down on the bench beside him and immediately stood back up, which was how Lily processed most conclusions she disagreed with. Avery climbed up from the other side and tucked herself under his arm the way she had done since she was 2 years old, quiet and deliberate, like she had taken a measurement and determined this was the most efficient use of available warmth. Brooke sat on the ground in front of the bench and began sorting small stones into categories that made sense only to Brooke. It was a Tuesday in October. The sky was the pale, washed-out blue that comes after summer has given up and autumn has not yet fully committed. The park smelled like cut grass and cold water, and something burning from a grill somewhere on the other side of the trees. There were other families nearby. Dogs, a man jogging with headphones in, who went past them 3 times in the same direction, which was either a very small loop or a significant personal problem. Marcus finally opened the thermos. The coffee was the temperature of mild disappointment. He drank it anyway. This was the 11 minutes he had been hoping for, every day, for the past 4 years. 11 minutes where nobody needed anything. 11 minutes where the house was not behind him with its leaking pipe, and its homework folders on the counter, and its photographs he had rearranged 3 times, and still had not figured out the right configuration for. 11 minutes in a park, in October, with cold coffee, and 3 small girls who were, for this specific window, fully occupied. He pushed his sleeve up because the afternoon had gotten warmer than the forecast suggested. The tattoo on his left forearm caught the light, a compass rose, precise and clean, done in fine black lines that had held their shape across 11 years. At the 4 cardinal points, small and careful, were 4 initials. He did not look at it the way a person looks at decoration. He looked at it the way a person looks at something they carry, because putting it down was never an option. He was still looking at it when Lily, who had wandered 3 feet to the left of the bench and stopped, turned back. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the woman who had appeared, somehow, on the far end of the bench, not sitting, standing beside it, one hand on the back of the wood, as though she had simply been passing and stopped for a reason she had not yet decided on. She was perhaps 35, dark hair pulled back from a face that was tired in the specific way of someone getting over something. Not just a long day, but something larger, something that took more than sleep to recover from. She wore a light jacket, slightly too big for her, and she had the look of a person on a walk that had been prescribed rather than chosen. Lily stared at her. Then Lily stared at Marcus's forearm. Then Lily looked at the woman's wrist, which was visible below the cuff of her jacket. Lily's mouth opened. She was 7 years old, and she had not yet learned that some things should be thought about before they were said. She had not yet learned that sometimes a single sentence can walk into a room and rearrange every piece of furniture that was ever in it. "Hello, sir," she said to Marcus, because Lily called every adult sir, regardless of every piece of available information. and 3 years of gentle correction had accomplished nothing. She pointed, one small finger extended, at his forearm. Then she turned and pointed at the woman's wrist with the same finger. "My mom has that tattoo too." Marcus looked up. The woman looked down. The park kept going. Somewhere, ducks were being ducks. The jogging man went past again. A dog barked twice and stopped. Brooke continued sorting stones. Avery looked up from under Marcus's arm with the calm, measuring attention of someone who had been half listening to everything and was now fully listening to this. Marcus Webb did not move. He did not speak. He did not breathe, exactly. Or if he did, it was the kind of breathing that is really just the body keeping itself alive out of habit, while everything else in the person goes completely still. His eyes were on the woman's wrist. The tattoo was there. He could see it from where he sat. A compass rose. The same fine black line work. The same clean precision. Not similar. Not a coincidence of style. The same design. From the same hand. Made by the same person, who had bent over Marcus's arm 11 years ago and worked in the careful silence of someone doing something that mattered. His brother's design. His brother's hand, guided by his best friend. The artist with the garage studio and the steady lines and the quiet way of working that Marcus had always found more comforting than he ever said out loud. The woman was looking at him now, not at the tattoo, at his face. And she had the expression of someone who has just stepped off a curb they did not see and is still deciding, in midair, whether or not this is going to hurt. Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Lily turned to the woman and, with the supreme social confidence of a child who has never once considered that she might be inserting herself into something too large for her, asked, "What are your initials?" The woman blinked. She looked at Lily. Something passed across her face that was almost a smile, and almost something else entirely. "Elena," she said. "My name is Elena." She said it to Lily, but she was still looking at Marcus. And Marcus, who had not believed in signs for 39 years, who had built his entire life on the reasonable certainty that coincidences were just coincidences, and that the universe did not arrange things on purpose, sat on a park bench in October with cold coffee and 3 daughters, and looked at the wrist of a stranger. A stranger with his brother's compass rose on her skin. He went silent, in a way he had not gone silent since the phone call 6 years ago, that had ended one version of his life, and started a different one, quieter, and smaller, and shaped around an absence he had learned to carry without showing. Brooke looked up from her stones. "Dad," she said, "are you okay?" He was not sure yet. He thought about saying so. Instead, he looked at Elena, who was still standing at the end of the bench, and she was still looking back at him, and neither of them had yet found the words for what the next 5 seconds were going to require. "I think," Marcus said slowly, to no one in particular, "that you should probably sit down." Elena sat down. The bench held all of them, 3 small girls, 1 man with cold coffee and a compass rose on his arm, and 1 woman with the same compass rose on her wrist, and a story behind it that was about to meet the story behind his, for the first time, in a park in October, on an ordinary Tuesday that had just stopped being ordinary, the moment a 7-year-old girl pointed her finger at 2 people who were not yet strangers, and said the 7 words that changed everything. The silence between them was not comfortable, and it was not awkward. It was something in between, the way the air gets in the seconds before a door opens. Marcus was the first to look away, because looking directly at the tattoo on her wrist felt like something he needed a moment to prepare for. He looked at Brooke instead, who had returned to her stones with philosophical acceptance. He looked at Lily, who was watching both adults with the open intensity of a child who knows something interesting is happening, and is determined not to miss any of it. He looked at Avery, who had not moved from under his arm, and who was looking at Elena with the quiet, measuring attention she reserved for things she was still deciding about. Elena had her hands folded in her lap now, the right one over the left, which covered the tattoo. He noticed this. He thought she probably noticed him noticing. "I am sorry," she said. "I was not planning to sit. I was walking, and my side hurt, and the bench was here." "You do not have to apologize," he said. "I know. I just thought it might help with the silence." It did. A little. He set the thermos down on the bench beside him. How long have you had it? He asked. He did not have to explain what he meant. She considered the question as though it deserved careful handling. 10 years, she said. Almost exactly. He did the math without meaning to. Daniel had been gone for 6, which meant the tattoo came before the end of things, which meant she had been in Daniel's life when Daniel was still in his. The same artist, he said. It was not a question. She looked at him more carefully. You know the work. I know the person who did it. She was quiet for a moment. Colin. Yes. She nodded slowly. He has a very particular way with lines. I would know his work anywhere. She paused. I did not know, when I made the appointment, that he was already doing grief work. The phrase hit him somewhere precise and unexpected. Grief work. That was exactly what Colin had called it. That January, 3 months after the accident, sitting in the garage with the needle and the design, and the silence between two people who had both loved the same person and were now trying to figure out what to do with all of that. He had said, "This is grief work. You are turning something invisible into something you can see. That is what this kind of tattoo does." Marcus had not told anyone that. It was not the kind of thing he said. You knew Daniel, he said. She looked at the ground for a moment, then back up. Yes. How well? It was a direct question and he knew it, and he watched her decide how to answer it with the same honesty he had put into the asking. Well, she said, for a while. Lily, who had been standing slightly to the left of both of them, and absorbing this conversation like a small, curious sponge, chose this moment to sit down on the bench between them. She did this with the complete absence of self-consciousness that was either her greatest gift or her most challenging quality, depending on the day. She put her hands on her knees and looked from one adult to the other. Is he someone you both know? She asked. Marcus looked at his daughter. She had his eyes, all 3 of them did, that particular shade of gray-green that had come from his side of the family for at least 3 generations. In this light, looking at him with her direct and completely unguarded curiosity, she looked so much like the photographs of him as a child that it sometimes made him feel he was looking at a time he could not get back to. Someone we both knew, he said. Past tense. Lily absorbed this. She had a good instinct, beneath all the volume and forward motion, for when something was being handled carefully, and needed her to handle it carefully too. She nodded once, slowly, in a way that was too old for 7, and then she stood up and went back to the pond's edge without another question. Avery, still under his arm, spoke for the first time. The picture in the box, she said quietly. She was not asking. She was simply placing a piece of information where it belonged. Marcus looked down at her. He kept a small wooden box on the shelf in his closet. Inside it were things that did not fit anywhere else in the house. A watch that had stopped, letters, a restaurant napkin, laminated, with a sketch on it in black marker, and a photograph, printed from a phone, of 2 brothers at a birthday dinner, laughing at something outside the frame. Yes, he said, the picture in the box. Avery looked at Elena. Our uncle, she explained, with the simple clarity of a child summarizing something large into its most essential form. Elena's expression shifted in a way that was small and quick and very difficult to watch. She kept it together, which Marcus appreciated, because he was not sure what he would have done if she had not. I did not know he had a brother, she said. He never said. He did not always lead with the important things, Marcus said. Something crossed her face that was not quite a smile. No, she said, he did not. It was the first thing they agreed on, and it arrived with a gentleness that neither of them had been expecting from this conversation. Brooke got up from the ground and came over. She stood in front of Elena and looked at her wrist with complete directness. Can I see it? She asked. Elena looked at Marcus. He gave a small nod. She turned her wrist over and opened her hand. The compass rose sat in the pale skin of her inner wrist, precise and clean. The 4 initials were visible to anyone who looked closely enough, and Brooke looked very closely, her small brow pulled together with concentration. The letters are different from Dad's, she said. Yes, Elena said. What do they stand for? My parents, Elena said, and someone I loved. Brooke looked up at her. The same someone? Elena met Marcus's eyes over the top of Brooke's head. He was watching her with an expression she could not fully read, steady and careful, and holding something behind it. Yes, Elena said. The same someone. Brooke nodded, satisfied, and went to find Lily. Marcus poured the last of the cold coffee onto the ground beside the bench, an action that felt vaguely ceremonial, and then held the empty thermos in both hands. He was trying to figure out what to do with all of the things this afternoon had just handed him. The fact of her. The fact of the tattoo. The fact that somewhere in the 10 years before Daniel died, his brother had sat with this woman and told her enough of himself that she had let him mark something permanent on her skin, and had never once mentioned to Marcus that she existed. He thought about the birthday dinner, 3 years before the accident. He thought about Daniel, 3 drinks in, saying with the particular recklessness of someone who was feeling too much and had no other container for it. There was a woman, Marcus. One woman. I was an idiot, and I have no idea how to go back. Marcus had asked her name. Daniel had looked at the table. I did not deserve to say it out loud, Daniel had said. That is how bad I was about it. Marcus had never pressed. He had assumed it was a story without an ending, which was the kind of story Daniel sometimes lived in, and that it would either resolve or it would not, and either way, it was not his to carry. He had not imagined he would be sitting next to her in a park, 6 years after Daniel's funeral, in October, because a 7-year-old girl had pointed a finger and said 7 words that cut through every coincidence between them, and left them sitting in the same light. He looked at her. She was looking at the pond, the ducks, his daughters, who were now in a heated disagreement with each other about something he could not hear from this distance, but which was almost certainly about the ducks. He talked about you, Marcus said. She turned. Once, he said. He was not a man who talked about things he felt guilty about. But once, on his birthday, he told me there had been someone. He said he had not known how to go back and fix it. Elena was very still. He did not say your name, Marcus added. He said he had not earned the right to say it out loud. She looked away again. Her jaw moved. She pressed her lips together the way people do when they are holding something in that would take up too much space if they let it out. He was right, she said finally. He had been careless. She paused. But he was also the most alive person I had ever met, and I have never entirely figured out what to do with both of those things being true at the same time. Marcus understood this. He understood it in the particular way of someone who had been living inside the same complicated truth for most of his adult life, loving a person who was brilliant and warm and genuinely difficult, and then losing them before any of it could be resolved or finished or said properly. He drew the design, Marcus said. The compass rose. He sketched it on a napkin at a restaurant when we were in our 20s. She turned to look at him again. I know, she said softly. He showed me the napkin. He kept it in his wallet. Marcus went still. He had the napkin. It was in the wooden box in his closet, laminated, because he had found it in Daniel's wallet at the hospital, and he had not known what else to do with it except protect it. He had never told anyone what it was or where it had come from. He had simply laminated it and put it in the box with the other things that did not fit anywhere else. He had not known until this moment that the napkin had been shown to anyone, that Daniel had carried it and offered it, even once, to someone outside the family. He thought about the map between them, 2 tattoos, 1 design, 1 dead artist who had drawn it on a napkin in a restaurant, and then given pieces of it to 2 different people who had never met, until now, until a Tuesday in October, until a child pointed a finger and said the 7 words. I have the napkin, Marcus said. She looked at him. In a box at home, I laminated it. He paused. I did not know he had shown it to anyone. Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but careful, the way you carry a cup that is very full. He told me it was a map, she said. He said a compass rose is not a decoration, it is a promise that you always know which direction you came from. Marcus looked down at the tattoo on his arm. He had known that. Of course he had known that. Daniel had said the same thing to him, once, when they were young, and the world felt like something they could navigate together. But hearing it from her mouth, in this park, in October, 6 years after he had stood at a graveside and accepted a folded piece of paper from a pastor he had never met. It landed differently. It landed like something he had been walking toward for a long time, without knowing there was a destination. Avery, who had never left her position under his arm, looked up at Elena. "Are you going to come back?" she asked. The way she asked it was not hopeful or pleading. It was simply a question, the way Avery asked all questions, which was directly, and without the extra layer of feeling that other people wrapped around their words. Elena looked at the girl, then at Marcus. Marcus looked at his daughter, then at Elena. "I do not know yet," Elena said honestly. Avery accepted this. She nodded once, in the same careful way Lily had nodded earlier, and tucked herself back under Marcus's arm, and looked at the pond. The afternoon had gotten longer and cooler, and the other families in the park had begun to thin out, people gathering dogs and children and leftover picnic things, and the ducks had moved to the far end of the water where things were quieter. Marcus and Elena sat on the bench with 3 small girls between and around them, and for a while no one said anything, and it was not the silence of strangers. It was something else. Something that needed more time before it had a name. They ended up at a coffee cart near the park's east entrance, which was Marcus's suggestion, and Elena's agreement, and Lily's enthusiastic endorsement, largely because the cart also sold small bags of roasted peanuts, and Lily had decided she wanted some. Marcus bought coffee for himself and Elena, and peanuts for Lily, and a chocolate chip cookie that Avery and Brooke split with the precise, surgical fairness of 2 people who had been conducting exactly equal divisions of shared resources since they were old enough to count. It was not a plan. It was the natural extension of a conversation that was not ready to stop. They sat at a small outdoor table with 2 chairs and a third one pulled from a neighboring table, and the girls arranged themselves on the ground nearby in a configuration that seemed chaotic, but was actually, Marcus knew, a very deliberate system of proximity, with Avery closest to him, Lily closest to where something interesting might happen, and Brooke in the middle, because Brooke was always in the middle. He told Elena about Daniel the way you tell someone about a person when you know they already knew him, and so you do not have to begin at the beginning. He told her the parts she had probably not seen, the older brother parts, the childhood parts, the version of Daniel that existed before he became the man she had known. Daniel had been, from the very beginning, the kind of person a room reorganized itself around, not because he demanded it, but because he generated a quality of attention and warmth that people moved toward instinctively, the way plants turn toward light. Marcus had spent most of his childhood being the more cautious, more organized, more responsible version of the two, which was a role he had not resented, because somebody had to do it, and because Daniel's particular brilliance seemed to require a counterweight, someone who would remember the practical things while Daniel was busy noticing everything beautiful about the world. He could draw anything, Marcus said, anything he looked at. He could put it on paper exactly as it was, not just accurately, better than it was. Somehow, he could see the ideal version of a thing inside the real version, and he would draw that. Elena was looking at her coffee cup. "I know," she said. "I used to watch him sketch on whatever was available. Napkins, margins of books, backs of receipts. He drew a portrait of our mother on the back of a utility bill once," Marcus said. "She had it framed. It is still in her house." Elena smiled. It was the first full smile, and it changed her face in a way that made Marcus understand immediately that she had been holding back a significant portion of herself for the entire conversation, keeping it at a careful distance, and that the smile was what happened when a small piece of that distance collapsed. "He drew me once," she said, "on the back of a menu. I was talking and not looking at him, and when I looked up, he just turned the menu around and showed me." She paused. "I do not know what happened to it." "He probably kept it," Marcus said. "He kept everything he drew of people he cared about." She looked at him. "Did you find any when you were going through his things?" He nodded slowly. "There is a folder, in the same closet as the box. I have not gone through all of it." He stopped. "I always meant to, but I never found the right time. And then enough time passed that it started to feel like if I waited any longer, it would become something I was afraid to do." "I understand that," she said quietly. "I think it is probably time," he said. Not to her specifically. But she was there, and so he said it to her. He told her about the accident then, because she asked, and because she had been carrying her own incomplete version of the story for years, and he thought she deserved the full one. He told it the way he had learned to tell hard things, plainly, with the specific details that honored the truth of it, without the flourishes that people sometimes add to tragedy, to make it feel more like a story and less like a fact. January. Early morning. A stretch of road Marcus had driven himself dozens of times, between the city and the town where their parents lived. Black ice, invisible in the dark, on a curve that was perfectly safe in any other condition. The motorcycle had gone down at a speed that made everything that followed immediate. There was nothing dramatic about it in the way that some people imagined accidents were dramatic. It was simply a moment in which a life was present, and then the moment after, in which it was not. Elena listened without looking away. She had her hands around the paper coffee cup, and she was very still. "I am sorry," she said, when he had finished. "Thank you," he said. "I saw an obituary," she said. 2 years after, a mutual acquaintance shared it. I had not known." She paused. "I sat in my car for a long time." He looked at her. "I wish someone had told you sooner." "I was not sure I was someone who had the right to be told," she said. "We had not been in each other's lives for years by then." "That does not mean it did not matter," he said. She looked at him for a moment with an expression he could not fully read, the way sometimes a person's face holds several feelings at once, and they have not decided which one to let forward. "No," she said. "It does not." Lily appeared at his elbow with the peanut bag, which was now empty, and the information that a seagull had tried to take it from her, and that she had defended it heroically, a claim that Marcus accepted without verification. "Can we have ice cream?" Lily asked. "There is no ice cream here. There is a cart by the other gate. I saw it when we came in." "Lily, I am only saying it exists. I am not forcing you to go there." He looked at Elena. She was pressing her lips together against what he was fairly certain was a smile. "5 minutes," he said to Lily. She disappeared. He turned back to Elena. "My brother called you the one that got away," he said. Those were his words. He said it once, on his birthday, and I think he regretted saying it even as he said it. But he said it. Elena looked at the table. "He also said," Marcus continued, because he had decided somewhere in the last 20 minutes that he was going to say the whole truth and not the edited version, that he had been an idiot, and that he did not know how to go back and fix it. "He was right on both counts," Elena said. "He usually was," Marcus said. That was the complicated part. She laughed then, unexpectedly, and it was a real laugh, the kind that catches you before you can decide whether or not to allow it, and it lasted only a second before she pressed her hand over her mouth, as though surprised by herself. But it was there. It had happened. Marcus looked at the tattoo on his arm. "He designed this at a table in a restaurant called Henley's," he said. "It is closed now. He was 24. He had been drinking a beer, and I was telling him about some problem at work, and he stopped listening and started drawing on a napkin, and then he slid it across the table to me and said, 'This is us. This is the family. 4 points on the same compass.'" He touched the 4 initials one at a time. "M for Marcus," Elena said softly. She was not guessing. She was recognizing. He looked up. "He told me," she said. "He told me all 4. He showed me the napkin and he told me what each point meant." So Daniel had told her. He had sat with this woman and opened that much of himself, the napkin, the initials, the map he kept in his wallet. And then, he had not told Marcus she existed. He was not angry about that. He had passed through a version of that feeling over the past hour, and come out the other side of it, into something more complicated. A kind of ache for the specific way Daniel had always kept the most important things in separate rooms of himself, never letting any one person see the full floor plan. Oh, he was afraid, Marcus said, of most things that mattered to him. That was the thing people did not always see because of how much light he put out. But underneath it he was afraid. I know, Elena said. And then, quietly, so was I. He looked at her. I left first, she said. I think it is important that you know that. Not because it changes anything, but because you should have the accurate version. She was looking at the table again, steady and honest in the way of someone who has had a long time to make their peace with a truth they do not particularly like about themselves. He was careless with things I needed him to be careful with, and I was afraid of what that meant for us in the long run. And I left before we had the conversation that might have fixed it, because I was afraid of that conversation. She paused. I have thought about it many times. He had the conversation with a napkin and a beer, Marcus said. 6 months after you left. That is when he drew this. She was quiet. I think it was his way of saying it to you when he could not say it to your face, Marcus said. He was always better on paper than in person. She looked at the compass rose on her wrist. He came to find me, she said. 6 months after I left. He found me, and he showed me the napkin and he showed me the design, and he said he wanted to give me the eastern point. He said it was mine. She turned her wrist over and pointed to one of the initials, the one at the eastern point of her tattoo. E, she said, for Elena. Marcus looked at the compass rose on his arm. He looked at the eastern point of his own tattoo. The letter there was E, the same letter, the same point. He had always assumed, without examining it closely, that it stood for his mother, whose name began with a different letter, but whom he had sometimes associated with the East, because of something Daniel had said once about direction and belonging. He had never asked. He had not wanted to ask, because some things you decide to simply carry. He looked at Elena. She met his eyes. He put you on mine, Marcus said slowly. Years before I got mine done, he told Colin to put E at the eastern point. She was very still. I thought it was our mother, he said. Your mother's name begins with a P, Elena said. Patricia, he told me. He stared at his own arm. All these years he had been wearing her initial without knowing it. His brother had built her into the design, into the family map, before Marcus had ever known she existed. Daniel had put her in the eastern position, which was the direction of new beginnings, of first light, of every morning that comes after every night. And then he had kept both versions of the truth in separate rooms and never introduced them. Lily came back at this precise moment to report that there was definitely ice cream, that it was the good kind with the chocolate shell, and that Brooke had found a really interesting beetle, all of which required his immediate attention. Marcus stood up slowly. He looked at Elena. She was looking at the compass rose on his forearm, with an expression that was very still and very full. You should come, Brooke said from behind Lily, appearing from nowhere with a beetle cupped in both hands. The ice cream is very close. Elena looked at Brooke, then at the beetle, then at Marcus. I do not want to impose, she said. You are not, Avery said, from her position directly beside Marcus, where she had been standing unnoticed for the past 30 seconds. Dad does not say you should come unless he means it. Marcus looked at his daughter. She looked back at him with gray-green eyes that were too calm and too knowing for a 7-year-old. He looked at Elena. Come, he said. She came. Brooke released the beetle at the edge of the path and watched it disappear into the grass with the quiet satisfaction of someone who has done a small thing well. Then she straightened up and walked alongside Elena as they moved toward the ice cream cart, which was exactly where Lily had promised it would be. She did not take Elena's hand, which would have been too much, but she stayed within about 8 inches of her, which for Brooke was approximately the same thing. Lily reached the cart first and conducted a thorough investigation of the available options, which numbered 4, and asked Marcus to explain the difference between the chocolate shell and the plain kind in a level of detail that Marcus did not possess. He told her to pick one. She said she needed more information. He told her to pick one again. She picked one. Avery pointed at the same option Lily had chosen, which was what Avery almost always did, not out of indecision but because Avery had long ago established that Lily's intense preliminary research generally produced acceptable conclusions. Brooke chose the vanilla, which was different from both her sisters, which was also what Brooke almost always did. Marcus bought 4. Elena said she did not want one. Lily looked at her with such transparent skepticism that Elena reconsidered and accepted a small vanilla. They found a low stone wall nearby that served as a reasonable bench for all 5 of them, though it required some negotiation about spacing, which Lily handled with the assertive diplomacy of someone who believes strongly in fair distribution of wall space. They arranged themselves in a row, and for a while the most pressing matter in the world was ice cream, which Marcus found deeply and unexpectedly restoring. "Do you live near this park?" Brooke asked Elena. "About 10 minutes from here," Elena said. "I walk this way sometimes." "We come here every time Brooke wants ducks," Lily said, around a mouthful of ice cream, which is a lot. "Ducks are important," Brooke said, without looking up from her vanilla. "Brooke has a very strong position on ducks," Marcus told Elena. "I can see that," Elena said. She looked at Brooke. "What is it about them?" Brooke considered this. She was not a child who answered quickly if she could answer well. "They always look like they know where they are going," she said finally. "Even when they are just swimming around, they look like they have a plan." Elena was quiet for a moment. "That is a very good reason," she said. Brooke looked at her with approval, which was not something Brooke distributed casually. Marcus watched this exchange and felt something shift in his chest, in a way he did not examine directly, because examining it directly was not available to him yet. It was too early and too large for that. But he felt it the way you feel a change in pressure before rain, something in the air that tells you the weather is turning. He had built the years since his wife left around structure and routine, and the very specific love he had for 3 small girls who needed him to be steady. He had not allowed much space for anything else, not because he had decided against it deliberately, but because the days were full, and the nights were short, and somewhere along the way he had stopped noticing the edges of what he had built around himself. He noticed them now. He ate his ice cream and watched Lily explain to Elena the complete political landscape of the 2nd grade, which apparently involved several ongoing disputes over playground jurisdiction, and he watched Elena listen to this with the real attention of someone who was actually interested, not performing interest but genuinely tracking the narrative, asking follow-up questions that Lily answered with increasing enthusiasm. Avery, at his side, said nothing. She ate her ice cream slowly, and watched Elena with the measuring attention that was Avery's primary mode of engaging with anything new. She was not suspicious. She was cataloging, building an internal picture from available evidence, the way she did with everything that mattered to her. After a while, she said to Marcus, very quietly so only he could hear, "She is sad about something." He looked at her. "What makes you say that?" "Her eyes," Avery said. "She smiles, but her eyes are still sad, like yours used to be." He looked at Elena, who was now helping Lily identify, at Lily's passionate insistence, whether a particular pigeon near the cart was the same pigeon they had seen at the other end of the park, or a completely different one. "Used to be," Marcus repeated. Avery looked up at him. "You are less sad now," she said. "I think." He put his arm around her. She leaned into it. He looked at Elena. She had glanced over at exactly this moment, not deliberately, just one of those small random moments of turned attention, and for a second she caught him looking, and he did not look away. She did not look away either. Then Lily grabbed her sleeve to redirect her attention back to the pigeon situation, and the moment passed, and Marcus looked down at the compass rose on his arm. The eastern point. E. He had been wearing her without knowing it for 11 years. He had carried her on his skin through every version of his life since then, through marriage and fatherhood and loss and the 4 years of rebuilding that had come after. She had been there, in Daniel's careful handwriting, reduced to a single initial, tucked into the map that was supposed to be about the 4 of them: Marcus, Daniel, their parents. Except it had always been about 5. He thought about Daniel, 28 years old, calling Colin and asking him to add that initial, and then saying nothing about it to anyone. Putting it in and keeping it, the way he kept the napkin in his wallet, the way he kept things he did not know how to say out loud. He thought about what it means to love someone and run out of road before you can say it correctly. He thought about a compass rose and how a compass rose is not a decoration. It is a promise that you always know which direction you came from. He looked at the eastern point of his tattoo. And then he looked east, where Elena was laughing at something Lily had said. A real laugh this time, surprised and warm, And for the first time in a long time, Marcus Webb thought that the world might be trying to tell him something. He thought that maybe, for once, he should listen. They said goodbye at the park's east gate, which was not a dramatic goodbye, which was the right kind. Lily hugged Elena without asking permission, which surprised everyone, including Lily, who pulled back immediately with a slightly startled expression, as though her arms had acted without consulting her. Elena looked startled too, and then quietly pleased. Brooke waved. Avery said goodbye, Elena, in the precise and formal way she said everything. Marcus and Elena stood on the pavement for a moment with the girls reorganizing themselves around his legs, and the late afternoon light doing something particularly golden with the trees behind them. Thank you, Elena said, for the coffee, and for telling me about Daniel. Thank you for sitting down, he said. She smiled. My side hurts less now. Ice cream helps, he said. She looked at him for a moment. I am glad Lily talked, she said. I would have walked past. Me too, he said. On both counts. She nodded. She started to turn. Elena, he said. She turned back. He took his phone from his pocket. He held it out. She looked at it, then at him. She took it and put her number in, and handed it back without making it a larger moment than it needed to be, which he appreciated. He looked at the number. He looked at her. I have the folder from the closet I mentioned, he said. The drawings. I think there might be something in there that belongs to you. She was still. When you are ready, he said. There is no rush. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the three girls, one of whom was pulling on Marcus's jacket with increasing urgency, and one of whom was attempting to carry an interesting stone she had located near the gate, and one of whom was watching all of this with gray-green eyes that missed nothing. Thank you, Marcus, she said. She said his name for the first time, and he noticed it, and he did not say anything about noticing it. She walked away along the pavement, and he watched her go for a moment, before Lily successfully retrieved his attention with a series of complaints about the walk back to the car. He put the phone in his pocket. He thought about the compass rose. He thought about the eastern point. He thought about Daniel, who had known, in the particular way that Daniel knew things, that the map was not complete, that there was a fifth point, not on any compass rose, not at any cardinal direction, but somewhere between all of them, the place where the lines converge. He took Avery's hand. Brooke fell in on his other side. Lily walked 3 steps ahead and narrated the walk back to the car like a nature documentary, pointing out a crisp packet, a dog with an undignified haircut, and what she believed was a very suspicious pigeon. He sent the text at 9:15 that night. The girls were asleep. The house was quiet in the way that houses go quiet after children, a particular quality of silence that is not empty but full, the way a held breath is full. He was sitting at the kitchen table with the wooden box open in front of him. The laminated napkin was in his hand. The compass rose, sketched quickly in black marker by a young man who was laughing at something, slightly reckless, completely alive. He typed, I opened the folder tonight. There is a drawing of you. It is very good. He always drew the people he cared about better than they were. He held the phone. 3 minutes passed. Her reply came. He always said the drawing was not the person. It was just the part of them he could see. He read it twice. He typed, that sounds right. He set the phone down and looked at the napkin. Daniel had drawn this in a restaurant, on an ordinary night, from a feeling he did not have any other way to express. He had turned it into a design, and the design into 2 tattoos on 2 people who had loved him, and he had put them both on the same map without ever telling them the map was shared. Marcus did not know what came next. He knew that Elena had her mother's face in a photograph somewhere, and her father's sense of direction, and a surgery she had not fully explained, and a walk she did 10 minutes from this park because her doctor had told her to, and that she laughed when she was surprised, and listened when she was interested, and said the true thing even when it was complicated. He knew that his daughters had eaten ice cream with her, and that Brooke had stayed 8 inches from her side the whole walk, and that Avery had said, very quietly, that his eyes were less sad now. He knew that on the eastern point of a compass, Rose that had lived on his arm for 11 years, was a letter that had always belonged to her. He did not know what any of that meant yet. In practical terms, in the terms of days and conversations, and the slow work of building something from the materials that life puts in front of you when you are not expecting to receive them. He only knew that he was going to find out. He put the napkin back in the box. He looked at the drawing from the folder. Daniel had caught her mid-sentence, laughing at something, not looking at the artist, head slightly turned. It was done in pencil on the back of a restaurant menu, casual and quick, and absolutely precise in the way Daniel's drawings always were, getting to the essential version of the subject without any wasted line. She was, in the drawing, completely herself. He put it carefully beside the napkin. He would give it to her when the time was right. Not yet. There was no rush. She had said herself there was no rush, and he believed her, and he had learned in 4 years of raising 3 children alone that the things worth having were almost always worth the patience required to do them correctly. He closed the box. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Someone's porch light was on across the street. A car passed slowly with its headlights on, moving towards somewhere. He looked at his arm. The compass rose, the 4 initials, the eastern point. He had been carrying her for 11 years. He thought he could probably manage a little longer. He turned off the kitchen light and went to bed, and for the first time in longer than he could accurately remember, the house felt less like something he was maintaining, and more like something he was living in. Tomorrow, Lily would wake up first, and there would be arguments about breakfast, and someone would not be able to find a shoe, and the drive to school would involve at least one strong opinion about Canadian geese, which Avery found majestic and Lily found personally offensive. He would drive them to school. He would think about a compass rose. He would think about a woman who walked in the park because her doctor told her to, who had his brother's handwriting on her wrist, who had listened to a 7-year-old's complete theory of pigeon identity with genuine interest. He would think about the eastern point. And when the time was right, he would call.